We shall now join Audrey Forshey in her upcoming segment called Homes Today. Audrey is a RE/MAX realtor and is a true friend to the community. She's also a well-known advisor. Here on the set, Audrey has alongside her a very interesting guest who will educate us about mold inspection. Interesting. Let's have a look.
Hello friends, thanks for joining us again today. Again, we have our friend Dan Deese from Top to Bottom Services who's going to talk to us today about mold inspections and mold in general. So we're going to...
Oh, are you serious now? We're going to talk about mold?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right.
So let's talk about different kinds of mold. There's all kinds of different molds that we have in the home. What kind of mold, when you do an inspection, what are you looking for?
Well, here's the thing about the mold. You're so right, there's mold everywhere, right?
Right.
So most people just laser focus in when they see something, some discoloration behind the air conditioner, or they pull the refrigerator out and they go, ooh, right?
There's mold, right.
Right. So they're looking at, and we can talk about it a little bit later about what that actually is.
Yeah.
But if we have already agreed that mold is everywhere, then why am I not seeing black stuff flying all over the place?
Right.
It's because now what I'm looking at behind the refrigerator or the air handler is actually the byproduct of the mold growth. As the spores land and the environment is conducive to mold growth, it starts to eat or devour whatever they've landed on, and that's the byproduct that we're seeing, that discoloration.
So it's now has kind of like a host as where it's living in the moisture and that sort of stuff.
Right.
Is that what makes it grow and all that sort of
Well,
stuff?
it needs three things. Mold needs three things, right? So it's going to need oxygen,
Right.
unless we're going to be the boy in the bubble. We can't avoid that, right?
Right.
The other one is it's going to need to have a food source.
Okay.
And that food source can be anything from dust that's in your air ducts. People talk about getting their air ducts clean, and there's mold in there. So because mold can devour the dust that's in there. And then the more commonly, what you were asking earlier was, what we see, it's on the sheetrock, it's on the paper product,
Right.
it's the penicillium, it's that kind of mold spore that grows very common. And then the third thing is moisture.
Right.
And that's the one leg on the stool that we have complete control over, either through a dehumidifier or just outside water management, maybe an interior flood control system like a sump pump, things like that.
Okay. So when you do a mold test, how does that work? Are you I know we see it sometimes, and like a home inspector might say, oh, look, there's mold there, which in fact it might be something else, but it's a microbial material that they're seeing, and maybe come in and have a mold company take a look at it. So are you, other than that, are you doing air samples? Is there such a thing for the air that you want to see what you're breathing?
There's different types of testing, and full disclosure, I do own another company called Green Home Solutions that does some mold remediation, so I've actually delved in this quite a bit. There is different types of testing that you were talking about. You got the air samples, which I'll talk about in a second. We got the swab, and then we also have maybe a tape lift. Okay, the swab is what you're familiar with when you go to the doctor, you get the sore throat, and they take the Q-tip and they swab your throat and find out if you have strep.
Right.
That's a swab. So that swab test is actually going to let us know, is there or is there not mold there?
Right.
Okay. Now, it's not really going to tell us the quantity of the mold spores. You can't look at that Q-tip and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's no way to count all those spores, right? So then what you can do is a tape lift where you put it on the suspicious growth, the discoloration, you pull it off, you send it off to a lab, and you can kind of picture when you were in high school and you put it underneath the microscope and you can see that, you can count those spores up. That's another way of doing it.
Okay.
And then the last one that you talked about was the air samples,
okay,
which is really great. What we're doing with the air samples is we're finding out, are the spores that we're seeing in the corner, that's the indication, if you will, of growth, has that actually been out into the air and at what levels? The EPA, we've talked about on other shows, where the EPA is never going to tell you if you're in a safe or not safe or whatever. Obviously, they wouldn't do that. So what they do in a roundabout way is they describe it as a safe haven. Your home should be a safe haven. And they define that as the levels of mold that you find on the outside of the house are actually at a higher concentration than we found on the inside.
Oh, that's interesting.
So we're going to run a test down in the basement, maybe in the utility room. We're going to catch all those spores, send it off to a lab. They're actually going to count it. They're going to say, this is the spore you have, and this is how many you actually have of that spore. And then they're going to take that one from the outside, and they're going to put it right next to the table, and they're going to say, you found this outside, and this on the inside. It's higher outside, so you're actually at a higher risk going to get your mail than you are hanging out watching the Redskins play in the basement.
Okay, cool. So they don't, but like we talked about before, radon, there's a arbitrary number that's
Right.
picked. There's not.
They're avoiding that. Now
Okay.
they're completely avoiding that because really your reaction to mold has everything to do with the individual's actual immune system. So you and I could actually be walking out right now. One of us might be allergic to pollen, right?
Right.
So I go out, my eyes start tearing. You look at me and go, "Hey, what's the sad story about?" Because you're not allergic to it.
Right.
Same thing with mold. So you can be in an environment. It depends on your immune system. So the government's not going to come out and say you are safe because of these low levels. They don't know your immune system. So they're going to go ahead and kick the ball or punt it down to where it says the safe haven, comparing the outside to the inside.
And again, just like you said, it's your how you react to
Right.
the molds and stuff like that. So if I don't have asthma, somebody with asthma might
be
be
higher
so,
probability.
yeah, so much more sensitive to having the mold in the house and stuff. I know that especially when I go like to maybe like a foreclosure or something, and there might be water or moisture in the basement. You can just see all the fuzz and all the stuff up
You're
and
like, is
down.
that mildew or is it mold? Right?
I don't know what it is, but I know that it stinks pretty bad. Like you
Right,
can
right.
smell it, and honestly, in our MLS system, agents that have foreclosed listings, a lot of times they'll say that you have to sign a disclaimer to go in and show the property because
Wow.
they feel like it's not safe for people to go in there, and you're supposed to wear a mask to go in and look at some of the properties. So what's the difference between mold and mildew? Like I say, I walk down in the basement and I go, oh, there's mold everywhere, and I don't know what I'm talking about,
Right.
but it looks like mold to me.
Or you'll
So-
go down there and say, oh, or the listing agent will say, oh, that's not mold, that's mildew.
Yeah.
Right? Because they think that sounds a little bit better.
Yeah, right.
Well, here's the story about mildew.
Okay.
The mildew only grows, no exceptions. Mildew only grows on live plants, not dead plants, live plants. So the likely you have mildew down there, unless you want to have Sherwood forest in your house,
Yeah.
you don't have mildew. That's
Okay.
mold.
Okay.
In your bathroom with that Tilex, mold, mildew,
It's mold.
It's mold. Now, in advertisement on those things, only a certain percentage of that actually has to be true on the cover of the bottle. Everything else can be marketing. So the difference is mildew only grows on live plants.
Okay. So you really could have mildew if you had
You
a live
could.
plant,
You
but
could.
but that's not really
That's
what we're
really
looking
not
at.
what you're smelling.
So, okay, so we're going in a house. I got a buyer that really wants this house, and I have had this happen, and there's been water coming into the basement, and a lot of times, like I've said before, it could be the water coming in through the gutters, the downspouts. So let's talk about how
That's
we're
just
gonna.
common reasons.
Yeah, it is. And so let's talk about the ways to keep mold out of your house. So what
Okay.
are the things we want to do before we have mold to make sure we don't get any mold?
That's a great question. The outside maintenance of your house is extraordinarily important. We already talked about the three things it needs.
Yeah.
Well, the one that you have complete control over under normal circumstances, other than acts of God with heavy floods,
Right.
is the water. So if we can keep the outside grading around your home properly graded away from the house, trees away from the home, gutters clean, downspouts extended away from the house, and then keep that humidity low in the basement, you're not going to have an issue. So typically in the state of Maryland, we want to be right around 55% humidity in that basement. And now there's equipment, humidifiers. You can actually program it with a pump. It pumps it out, sends it out to another location, keeps the humidity down, and you're not going to get the mold.
Okay.
Now you might have a one-time water event.
Right.
You know, like my son takes a bath and overflows the tub.
Right.
That's a one-time event. If I can get to it and clean it up and dry that area through air movement, I'm not going to have an issue. If I go ahead and leave that alone, I take a wet sweater, jam it underneath my towel, underneath the bed, and I come out in a couple of days and get it, it's funky, it's
Yeah,
moldy.
yeah.
So as long as I handle that one-time
Yeah.
event really well, you're not going to have an issue with it.
Okay. All right. So, so we want to keep the water away to keep us from getting any mold. So then let's say I have the buyer that does want to buy the house and there is mold in the house. What are we going to do? How do we abate the mold? What's the process?
Well, there's different ways to look at it now. There used to be just really one trick pony, right?
Right.
It was go in, cut it out, if you're a realtor watching the show, you've been in the basements where it's 2 foot cut around
Yes.
the basement, they had mold, right? Well, that's the way that everyone used to do it, because we used to say, just like asbestos abatement was, let's get it, let's remove it, and that's how you actually treat it. Well, now you can still do that, and that is actually a great tool in certain situations. If you have damaged substrate, the sheetrock is wet, it's damp, it's damaged, the integrity has been compromised, it does need to be removed. But now there's tools out there and resources to use, like enzyme-based products, encapsulation products. You really need to have a licensed professional in the industry with some experience to come in and assess yours. So I'm not comfortable with saying this is what you do,
Right.
because it's really
Different.
based on the scenario. Right.
Okay, and so they're like other inspectors and contractors and stuff. The person doing the work should be licensed
Absolutely.
doing mold remediation.
Now, here's the thing. If you call right now and you talk to anybody who is in the mold remediation industry, there is no licensing for that if you're in the DMZ, okay? It doesn't happen.
Okay.
Now, you have to be licensed to do work in that state, but there is no license for mold. Now, there's certification, there's training, there's things that would actually elevate you, just like in your industry, and say, hey, well, I have these credentials, right? It's slightly different. So it's not like a mold license to do business. It's really the training and the certification.
Okay.
That's what you got to do.
So if I have a contractor, which I have had contractors, I would say, there's mold in the basement of this house. Can you go take care of it? And they're, yes, we take care of the mold. But if they're licensed contractors, does that fall, do you think, under their state license
they can.
maybe
Now,
or something?
Well, yes. Well, here's the story about, especially in Maryland, right? Because most of the viewers are here in Maryland. Well, Maryland's going to say even the mold company that's not licensed to do mold, we can actually break something in somebody's house, meaning cut something out, but we can't repair it. Once you repair it, now you're a general contractor and you have to have an MHIC license.
Okay.
So slightly different. So the contractor that you're dealing with could do the one I talked about before, where they take it, they pull it out and leave. But it's kind of like a plumber, right? So the plumber might have a particular skill set. That plumber doesn't mean that she knows how to do HVAC, right?
Right.
So just because they got that license of a contractor, make sure that you know that they have done things. Make sure you know that they've done this type of remediation and this type of treatment. And also, what are they going to do at the end? How are they going to prove to you that they've gotten all the mold out? Are they going to go ahead and do a post-test? Are they going to provide any kind of guarantee? What's that look like?
So if we hire you to assess the mold and you would tell us how to remediate it, right?
Right.
And so then can we potentially have the contractor do the actual,
Absolutely.
drywall work and stuff? Now, when you look at it, you're cleaning or encapsulating or whatever it is, you're doing that work. Is that how I understand it?
There's I think what we're talking about is, and you're specifically addressing me, there's different hats, right?
Yeah.
So let's say I have the home inspector hat on or the home inspector belt. I'm looking at it to say, hey, listen, this is probably where the water is coming from, or this is where the humidity was. This is what's causing this particular environment, and that's what the home inspector is going to do. Then now I'm taking that hat off, and I'm putting on the mold remediation company, right?
Right.
So now I put that hat on, and I go, okay, now what do I need to do to get this particular one elevations down? And it could be extracting some material. It could be the encapsulation, depending on if you're using that resource. Green Home Solutions doesn't do that. They use a proprietary product that's an all-green natural product that you can apply and has an instant kill. So that's what the remediator is going to do. They're going to look at it and say, what type of solution is best for this particular environment? Now, the really cool thing is, because just like we were talking about a couple weeks ago about the radon, was that now that this abatement the prices have started coming down and more resources have come up. There's a company called Testall, which is great. So you can actually send your test results to Testall as a third party. They're going to analyze that and give you the best solution, and then that way it narrows your focus. So now you don't need to be an expert. You just got to go ahead and say, Testall, where do you think I need to be?
Okay, that's good. And so, and then back to the contractor, the general contractor. If like drywall has to be cut out, that's who we're going to have.
Perfect.
Do that work. But then I think, like you said, maybe it would be a good thing to have you come back and make sure
That's
that
right.
they did the proper work, that they did the proper remediation or abatement, whatever word
Yeah.
it is that you use. And so then is that the point where another air sample or another sample would come
Ideally,
in?
yes. Ideally, what
Okay.
we'd want to see when we come back out, we'd want to see the receipt, the
Yeah.
scope of work, right?
Yeah.
Because believe it or not, I've actually gone out personally onto spaces, and they say, here's the receipt, and I look at the credentials of the receipt, it's a handyman.
Yeah.
The handyman doesn't know what they're doing
Yeah.
on that particular thing. So yeah, the person paid for the handyman, but it didn't get the job done. The post tests are really going to be the telling. They're going to
Okay.
say, I am now at a lower level than we were. And I didn't have time to really get into it, but the mold spores in Maryland and everywhere else are slightly different, and they're specific ones. Even if it's not elevated, but you have that particular spore, it's something you need to consider.
Okay. I thank you again so much. Such great information from
Great.
you.
So fun.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us again today. See you next time.